Hi, I'm Nettie Walters. Welcome to the Art of Mastering Boundaries. This is for you if you know that your time, energy, mental health, and relationships would all benefit from setting clear, kind boundaries, but you're not sure where you need them or how to set them, or what your life and relationships could look like on the other side of healthy boundaries. More than that, boundaries might still feel uncomfortable, and you could use some validation that your needs are worthy and that you don't have to feel guilty or selfish for expressing them. This workshop will help you identify the boundaries you need to clearly see the freedoms those boundaries will bring and empower you to set the limits that will set you free. And I hope that today, with you being here, you're going to gain that freedom and confidence and know that you're worthy of setting boundaries. Mastering boundaries is a masterclass and a workshop. So it will be informative and interactive. And I'm going to offer you, just like everything else that I offer in my free workshops, simple strategies for soulful self-care. How can you lead soul first in your life in the simplest, easiest way to implement? I'm going to keep everyone on mute. I'm going to open it up for discussion and Q&A at the end. And for now, let's just communicate in the chat. Here are some signs that your boundaries are busted. If you feel like your relationships or a particular relationship is one-sided, you feel drained in someone's presence or after they leave, you get angry and irritable but don't know why. Your environment quiets at night and you're tired, but your mind is racing and you can't sleep. Maybe you get negative or anxious after spending some time with someone, or there's little things that set you off out of proportion. Like big things, you're cool and calm, but then you lose your keys and you go bonkers. You consistently find yourself avoiding that certain person or certain group of people, and you've considered maybe even taking a break from them. You go, and you get sick and exhausted and drained, and only then do you give yourself a break. You agree to everything just so things can go smoothly. So you're just like, yes, just so it's nice and smooth, right? Or you're told directly or indirectly that their feelings, the other person's feelings, are more important than yours. So you acquiesced at the expense of your own goals. Or you do way too much and you live way too fast. Sometimes boundaries can be for ourselves too. You feel dread or anxiety around a conversation topic. You regularly receive unsolicited opinions or commentary, and you just want to make it stop, but you don't quite know how. You regularly get sucked into others' conflict and drama. You constantly relive conversations and beat yourself up for what you said or didn't say, like this mental gymnastics kind of game, like the meeting in your head after the encounter. It's this overworking, this over-responsibility, the over-commitment, the over-scheduling, the no downtime kind of people that I love to help. So please allow myself to introduce myself. I am Nettie Walters. I'm a certified integrative nutritional health coach. I'm a licensed yoga teacher in many modalities. I'm an author ×2, and I'm mompreneur. I have 3 babies, some small and some very, very tall. And research shows that more than 50 people, more than 50 women actually, and 40% of men describe themselves as people pleasers. So more than 50% of women and more than 40% of men describe themselves as people pleasers. Are you a people pleaser? I'm a recovering people pleaser. More than 70% of women say they go to extreme measures to avoid conflict, and close to 70% of women prioritize others' needs first at the cost of their own needs, not wants, needs. And it's because of this that I love guiding overworked, undernourished women who struggle with practicing self-care through my signature formula of wholeness plus holiness equals holiness, my holiness formula, where we elevate self-care to soul care for fulfilling life. So personally, the only breaks that I ever took, just like I just mentioned, were when I was sick and in bed. And even then, sometimes I still worked. I'd agree to everything just so things would go smoothly, and I avoided conflict at all costs. I still find myself in this pattern sometimes. And on top of that, my relationships, my chosen relationships, were one-sided, leave me feeling drained from getting sucked into their drama. And I'm like, no drama mama. And it was exhausting. But I learned some skills, and I'm going to share these skills with you today to get out of those habits. And because I did, I know you can too. So today we're going to do 3 things. We're going to establish a prerequisite to setting boundaries. We'll discuss some simple guidelines, types, and methodologies to boundaries. And we're going to actually write a boundary of your choosing step by step together here today. And please wait until the end. Watch to the end. Stay with me to the end because I have a special surprise for you that I cannot wait to share. Let's talk a little bit about my coaching philosophy. I coach by individuality. Everyone is different. What works for me might not work for you, especially in food and nutrition. Some person's medicine might be another person's poison. So I honor everyone as an individual. In holistic nutrition, I teach it on and off the plate. The foods we eat are secondary. The foods that sustain us are called primary foods, and those look like spirituality, relationships, career, movement, self-image, all the arenas of life, because everything is integrated and we need to be fulfilled in all arenas of our life to keep the circle of life moving forward. Another one of my principles is crowding out. So I don't think about things as far as restriction and black and white. We try to add in more of the good stuff so that there's less room for the bad stuff. Maybe that's in your food, but maybe that's also in your mindset or your movement. And finally, simplicity. Simple steps for soulful self-care. We lead, or I'll encourage you and empower you to lead soul first. How do we do that in the easiest, simplest way so that we can adapt to it sustainably and functionally for the rest of our lives? And I'll define soul care for you because I'll probably mention it. That's the practice of taking an active role in contributing to your mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being in every season of your life, because maybe what works for you now didn't work for you 20 years ago, and it won't work for you 20 years from now, or maybe even tomorrow. And that you take an active role in contributing to your well-being in such a way that the effects spontaneously impact others. Like you become this wellspring of generosity and contribution because it's just overflowing from you. It's just the natural reaction. Here, please let me share with you a client testimonial, just so you don't have to take my word on it. This is someone I worked with in my signature program, my holiness program, and how our collaboration benefited her. Amy says, Nettie taught me how to give myself permission to find the joy and how to choose how to spend my time. The biggest tangible change I've noticed since beginning the program has been possessing the consciousness of setting healthy boundaries and the importance of self-care without feeling like I had to deserve it before allowing it. This was an amazing journey that I'll continue on thanks to Nettie's encouraging guidance. Amy came to me because she was feeling a little bit stuck in her life. She had no idea that she had to earn her self-care. And we'll see how self-care turns into boundaries and how boundaries are self-care. And she had no idea that setting some boundaries and allowing herself to rest would change her entire life. She was a mama who worked full time, who volunteered at church and in the community and at school. And all she needed to do was tap into her values and set some boundaries. It was life-changing. I'm going to share with you a few quotes. This first one is from a licensed therapist, and it's exactly what I just talked about. This is from the book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And she says the root of self-care is setting boundaries. It's saying no to something in order to say yes to your own emotional, physical, and mental well-being. So let's keep that in mind. Here's my secret sauce. We have to know our values and our principles, and they need to be strong and meaningful enough to pull us forward in our decision making. Like, motivation can only push you so far. You need to know your values and have your vision so it can pull you forward. And life is just so much easier this way. And our boundaries simply then just become us staying in integrity, staying in alignment for the assignment, becoming all of what we were created to be. And when I look back on my life, the only regrets that I have or had are decisions I made where I didn't honor my principles. So know your core values. And if you don't know your core values, don't worry. I've got an exercise for you. Because when you give up on your core values or you allow others to treat you unlovingly and disrespect yourself, a yes to them is really a no to you. And when you don't set healthy boundaries, you say yes to everyone and everything else, and you're not clear on where you end and where others begin. So you open yourself up to be stepped on and taken advantage of, and if you're pulled in 100 different directions, you can't be whole. And we just talked about earlier, like on the self-care spectrum, the circle of life, all the different arenas of our life are interconnected and they all can affect one another. So if you cannot be whole, then you can't have a respectable whole self to offer to others in service and generosity and contribution and impact and the reason that you're here. And it becomes enmeshment. So that's going to lead us to another quote. And these two are from Atlas to the Heart, an amazing book by Brene Brown. And she says, exactly, and these are so meaningful to you. I hope that one of these two resonate with you. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and love me simultaneously. Boundaries are a prerequisite for the compassion and empathy. We can't connect with someone unless we're clear about where they end and where we begin. If there's no autonomy between people, then there's no compassion and no empathy. It's just enmeshment. So let's write down 1, 2, or 3 of your top values. This is nowhere near an exhaustive list, but you can use the words as the launching pad. You can choose 1 to 3 of your top values. And if you're joining me live as a part of your live bonus, I'm about to send you a list of around 200 core value words to choose from. Just click the link in the chat group. And if you are on the replay, here is a list that you can choose from. I'm going to share with you my top 3 as you're kind of reading through the list and choosing what's super important to you. I know you kind of might want to circle them all, but choose one. Choose one, and then maybe choose 2 or 3. My number 1 core value is spirituality. It's my connection to God. I chose these long ago when I first got into like self-development and self-help and working with my life coach and coaching. I started in corporate coaching. And I kind of redid this exercise as I was putting this PowerPoint together, and they still ring true. After all these years, I still have the same core values. So spirituality, my connection to God, health. Health is my second core value. And connection or family. Connection to my family. Family is my third core value. I'm going to give you an example of that later on. So spirituality, health, and family are my 3 top values in those order. So if you are watching the replay, you can go ahead and pause if you need more time. But we're going to move on when you have at least 1 value. So go ahead and write that value down. If you have the worksheet, you can write it down in the worksheet that I just sent in the chat, or you can write it on your journal. And when you clearly understand why you do what you do, when you clearly know your values, it becomes easier to set meaningful goals and make decisions that align with your values and aspirations. So clarity of purpose, it's like a compass that guides you through life's journey. Okay? So it helps you stay on course. When you know your values, you can stay on course. You know your principles. You know what you stand for, even when you're faced with challenges. And if you think of like a square piece of property, maybe you own a piece of land and you have a fence around it. Maybe you have a fence around your house. You can think of that value as being on your property. That's what's okay. Whatever honors your value is in that fence. This is what's okay when you're in my space. And this is what's not okay when you're in my space. If you do these things, that goes against my principles, my values, my core beliefs, I'm going to have to distance myself from you. You're going to have to stay on the other side of the fence or closer to the fence. And if you think about fences as an analogy for a boundary, we can move fences, and we'll get more into that later. So what is your value and what's okay for you and what's not okay for you? And I want you in your mind or on your piece of paper, answer these next questions. Like you can either meditate about them or journal on them. But I'll ask these next 4 questions. And if you need to pause the replay, you're more than welcome to for more time. In what ways is not communicating or holding my boundary affecting me? So you know your values, you kind of have a sense of what's okay and what's not okay. And your values are usually like so deep down innate in you, and you can have like this gut instinct, this gut reaction, ooh, not okay. And everyone's values are different. Thus the bio-individuality. And then we're going to dig a little deeper. Why do you really want to set your boundaries? Why do you really want to set a boundary? For an example, like maybe it'll bring you more energy. Maybe setting this boundary is going to bring you more time, more self-confidence. more freedom. Why do you want to set your boundary? Maybe you close your eyes and take a deep breath. Why do you want to set this boundary? You're so smart, you probably already know the answer. What are you afraid will happen if you set this boundary? These are important questions, especially when most of our lives we've defaulted to seeking love and belonging from people who didn't necessarily have the capacity to meet our needs. Boundaries isn't a skill we're taught in school. We haven't been taught this until now. And you're not crazy or different. You're just gifted with a growth mindset to become the highest, truest version of yourself. The need for boundaries will almost always have to be recognized and determined, and because other people aren't mind readers, communicated and implemented by you. You're almost always going to have to recognize and determine and communicate and implement your boundaries. Don't be surprised if maintaining them is a lifelong challenge. It's likely to be an imperfect process. It's the human experience, right? It can get messy, especially when we're new to setting boundaries or we're trying to up level our skill set around boundaries, and that's okay. So if there's any fear or anxiety coming up around setting boundaries for you, go ahead and write that down. And how are you going to feel after you set and keep your healthy boundaries? You can use all of your senses here. How will you feel after you keep your boundary? What's on the other side of that fear and anxiety? What's on the other side of that boundary for you? Is it freedom, joy, time, energy, confidence, safety, well-being, peace? What is it for you? While you keep finishing your thoughts, here's a testimonial from someone I worked with who found uncovering her values extremely effective and how it helped to create a ripple effect in her life. Alyssa said, Nettie spent time with me to dig deep to help me really understand why I respond and operate the way I do so that she could curate an action plan for healing and change. The biggest tangible change I've noticed since beginning the program has been the reduction in stress, the response, the fight or flight in my body. The biggest tangible change that she had was reduction in her stress response, her fight and flight response in her body. The fact that her body, she says, the fact that my body is legitimately acting more rested despite increasing pressures is a testament to Nettie's ability. The most significant overall change I have noticed has been my understanding of my identity as the daughter of the King. This knowledge, along with the guidance to realign my priorities in a way ordained by the Lord, has allowed me to show up as the best version of myself for my family, my clients, and my community, and to do it from a place of rest. I always thank Alyssa for this testimony, but I didn't have the ability. I didn't make the changes. This is the work that she did. She figured out her core values. And she created a life by design instead of default around her core values, exactly like what we're going to do here today. And it created a ripple effect in her life where she could show up in a different way for her clients, in her own home with her family, and with all of her friends and her community. And to do it from a place of rest, from a place of overflow. Now that you know your values, let's build on that. So, if you're live with me, you also got a boundaries worksheet. It's included in the link I just sent in the chat. These guidelines aren't here, but you might want to pull that out and get ready. So the number one guideline I like to share, just like we just touched on, is to establish what's okay and what's not okay. Boundaries mark the limits of behaviors that are acceptable to you, where words or actions beyond that limit cause you harm or make you feel unsafe. That's a quote from Melissa Urban's Book of Boundaries. And number two, it's really super important. Boundaries are about what you will do if the other person disrespects you and the values that you hold. Boundaries are about you and your actions. So boundaries are not telling another person what they are going to do. That's making a request, and making a request is a very different thing. So boundaries and requests are two different things. If someone does something and you tell them how you're going to respond to it, that's a boundary. If you ask someone else to do something, that's a request. 3, boundaries can be with other people, but they can also be with yourself. So, for example, I love connection. It's super important to me, and my family is one of my top 3 values. So after school, I take 5 minutes of one-on-one time. I mean, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, with each of my kids. So I have an agreement with myself during that time that I'm not going to allow any distractions of myself. So that means me putting my phone away, finishing up the chores before the school bus comes. I need this connection to feel fulfilled. And so I honor my soul care commitment to myself, and I make sure the distractions are gone so that I have that quality time with each of my children. So that's a boundary that I have for myself. And it's not perfect, but I try to do that every school day. And number four of 8, we're breaking our own trust or neglecting our own needs is disrespectful to ourselves. Have you thought about that? This is a big one when it occurred to me. A big one for me to cultivate change. So don't send a boundary that you don't intend to honor. It's the opposite of soul care. It creates the very internal turmoil that we are trying to eliminate. So setting boundaries can feel like a betrayal to others, but not learning to set boundaries is almost always a betrayal to ourselves. So I'm going to repeat that. Setting boundaries might feel like a betrayal to others, but not setting boundaries is almost always a betrayal to ourselves. Whew. Okay, number 5. Boundaries are normal. You are participating in boundaries with others and with yourself all of the time, whether you're conscious of it or not. They're normal and they're healthy, and your needs matter. Your needs, your comfort, your well-being, your safety, your joy, your peace, they matter. And it's not selfish to want to protect those things. Boundaries are what you will do. So we want to use I language. Boundaries are not used to tell other people what they can do and cannot do. Boundaries are established to help you plan and communicate your response to what other people say or do. Different than a request. Boundaries will tell other people what I will do in response to their behavior. Okay, I language. And we're going to get into this in a minute. We're getting so close to setting your first boundary with me together. So remember that I language, and I'll remind you. Number 7, boundaries should be both clear and kind. And clear is kind. I think that's from Brene Brown too. Boundaries keep you safe and healthy and make your relationships better. It's not other people's job to guess what my boundaries are. And it's not my job to guess what your boundaries are. It's my job to set and hold my boundaries. Clear and simple is kind. And I know this is out there a lot. You've probably seen it. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to apologize. It is your job to keep boundaries, to keep you healthy and safe. You don't have to apologize for them. They're normal. They're healthy. Your needs matter. You're worthy. Don't apologize for that. You can just say no. You can just say, no, thank you. And there's no explanation or apology needed. And finally, how other people choose to respond to your boundaries, it's not your responsibility. And quite frankly, it's none of your business. People do not need to understand or agree with your boundary in order to respect it. They don't. Only people, and I'm going to probably repeat this too, the only people who get upset about you setting boundaries with them are those who are benefiting from you not having any boundaries. The only people who get upset about you setting boundaries are those people who are benefiting from you not having boundaries. If they can't respect it, if they can't respect your boundary, and you're continuing to carry those people around, they're costing you your peace, and they're too heavy. They're costing you too much. Okay, so I'm going to present 2 more concepts, and we're going to get into setting boundaries. There are 3 types of boundaries. A boundary is a clear limit, a fence, right, around how other people engage with you. So let's start with like rigid boundaries. These protect you from being hurt, like physically hurt, or external emotions. Maybe this is like an abuse situation. It can lead to isolation and lack of connection with others, though. So this rigid boundary, this is like a brick wall. There are certain circumstances where rigid boundaries are necessary, and I pray you never have to encounter those. But yes, there are places where they're completely appropriate. On the other side of that, we have porous boundaries that allow you to connect with people easily. These can be like boundaries that are super light. Other people can more easily oppose their ways and wants and wills on you when you have only porous boundaries, though. Okay? And in the middle, somewhere between, are flexible boundaries. This is the ability to balance having close relationships while maintaining independence. So just like Brene Brown said, I can love you and love me simultaneously with these boundaries. These are flexible boundaries. So if we think about the fence metaphor around your property, you can pick up that fence and constrict your boundary and bring it in a little bit. Maybe you need to widen the fence. It doesn't go all the way to the edge of your boundary, and that fence needs to go all the way to the road. Okay, so they're flexible. But you have to be very cognizant of which boundaries to keep more rigid and which boundaries to be more loose. That's kind of the only con. And I would say, in my opinion, in most circumstances, healthy boundaries are flexible. They're not rigid. We build fences. We don't build brick walls. Okay? So flexible boundaries in most circumstances are the one of the 3 types of boundaries that are going to work for you. So flexible boundaries. And the last big thing that I promise before we start setting boundaries together, again from Melissa Urban's book of Boundaries, the stoplight method. This is a color code. Okay. So, green, low risk. It's the gentlest language. It assumes the other person wasn't aware they're overstepping. And this other person, you're assuming they want to respect your limits. Your boundary language is clear, it's simple, it's generous, extra kind. and it leaves any potential consequences unsaid in the spirit of good faith. So let's say let's use the example of someone talking to you in a harsh tone or like elevated, like maybe they're yelling. An example of a green boundary would be like, oh, wow, that was really loud. Can you say that again? I had a hard time hearing you. Okay, extra kind. And then yellow is elevated risk. So if you think of a stoplight, green means go, yellow means caution, slow down. Elevated risk, use a little bit firmer language. You can use this like almost as a follow-up if the green boundary isn't respected or maybe it wasn't heard, or if you have like repeated interactions where this person is doing the same behavior that is maybe raising a bit of a red flag for you. And this person is maybe starting to indicate a higher threat. So your boundary language is just as clear, just as simple, just as kind, but maybe a little bit more firm. And maybe you include the consequence in here if it's appropriate. So this person continues to talk to you in like an aggressive way and be like, I actually don't respond to people who talk to me in that tone of voice. So can we have a do-over? Can you try that again? So now you have the intended consequence in there. I don't respond to people who talk to me in that tone of voice. Can you try again? And then red. Red is like severe risk, direct language, straight to the point. Your health, your safety, your relationship are in jeopardy. Maybe this is where you have more of a rigid boundary, like a brick wall. And your language is going to reflect the severity of the situation. This is their last reminder, and you make it very, very, very clear that you are going to hold your limit. You are prepared to play out the consequence, and you lay out the consequence really plainly here, and you're ready to voice it. This is still calm, it's still clear, it's still kind, but it's direct and firm, and here's the consequence. I don't respond to people who talk to me in that way. If you continue to talk to me in that way, I'm going to have to leave. Okay? If you continue to yell at me, I am going to have to leave. No apology, no explanation. This is what's going to happen. Okay, are you ready? Think about what prompted you to come here today and all that we've covered so far. Remember your values. Remember your why. Why do you need to set the boundary? And we're going to write your boundary. So get your pen back out, your paper. Who do you need to set a boundary with? Who and what situation comes to mind? If you aren't sure where to start, just choose a situation that feels the most threatening to you and your mental health and your relationship right now. And just keep that in mind. Who do I need to set the boundary with? And what is the specific behavior that you need to address with them? What is the specific behavior that you need to address with them? In the example I just used, maybe it's a personal relationship. Write that person's name down, and I need to address their aggressive tone because it doesn't make me feel safe, and it heightens my emotion, and it really hurts my feelings. Okay, so who and what? Now, this is like a negative feelings inventory. This beautiful inventory was put together by Melissa Urban in her book of Boundaries. And these are feelings associated with the lack of healthy boundaries. So if you don't set this boundary with this person for this reason that you just mentioned, How will you continue to feel? How will you continue to feel? And what are the consequences to you or the relationship? So if you don't set the boundary, how will you feel and what are the consequences? And these words maybe can help you come up with a list if you need some inspiration. How will you feel? What are the consequences? Either to you or among you. And now we're going to do the flip side of that, a positive feelings inventory. These are feelings typically associated with healthy boundaries. If I'm able to effectively set this boundary, how will you feel then? We kind of like brainstormed on this a few slides ago. How will you feel? What will you be free from? Or what will you be free to do if you can effectively set this boundary? Let's just assume the best. And this boundary conversation is going to result in what? Just visualize your benefits, your health, your happiness, your relationship. What's going to come when your person respects this boundary? Is that the freedom or the joy, the encouragement, optimistic? Maybe your relationship will feel more vibrant or maybe even more connection. What will that be? Okay, now we're actually going to jump into the language. It's time to find the clear, kind, simple rules that you need to set an effective boundary. So since you can't control this other person's behavior or actions, what can you do to ensure that your needs are met? So let me give you some examples, like, I am not going to answer the door if I'm busy and this other person shows up unannounced. Or I'm going to have to break up with my friend or my partner. Or maybe in a work situation, like I'm going to stop replying to texts on the weekend. And based on this answer, based on whatever it is that the action that you can take, and don't worry about being polite just yet, like, we're going to use I language here though. Don't worry about what it looks like, but based on your answer, what is the limit in your simplest terms? So make sure this limit comes from yourself. Make sure you use I language, but don't worry about being like polite. What are the actions that you need to take? And what is your limit? Like, what is the red? The red's on the stoplight. And now here we're going to refine our language just a little bit. We're going to go through the color coding, the green, yellow, red. And we're going to rephrase our limits in clear, kind, it's already simple language for a green boundary. So clear and kind language, make it direct, make it respectful, make it simple. It's a really great practice to actually practice stating your boundary. Like you can do mirror work. You can write it down in your journal over and over again. We're not doing that here today, but just make it simple, clear, and kind so that when it comes to the time, you can actually get it out, especially if you have any nerves, energy, emotions coming up for you. If I find they aren't respecting my boundary, I'll rephrase that into a stronger yellow boundary. So do that now. Write your yellow boundary. The green boundary doesn't typically include a consequence, but the yellow boundary might. And if they still aren't respecting my boundary, I'll give them one last chance and state the consequence using my red boundary. This is like last chance, super direct, firm language. Here's my consequence. Either choose to rise up and meet my boundary, or I'm out of here. So let's go back actually to the stoplight slide. Just as you're writing, and then take a look at your green, yellow, and red script that you just wrote for yourself. And here's the guidance on it. And just notice if the language that you used is conversational and natural. And if it seems like awkward for you to say or something that you wouldn't normally say in that certain way, can you rewrite that? You can always come back to that, but we want to rewrite those statements, the green, the yellow, the red script, in a way that's natural and conversational. Because you're actually going to have to say them in real life to a person. So can you put those in a natural conversational script for yourself so that you can practice it beforehand? Okay, moving on. So people set boundaries for all sorts of reasons. Some are really deeply personal. And I'm going to tell you right now that if you don't want to share why, you don't have to. So just like you don't have to share your reason for establishing the boundary, you also don't have to answer the people when they ask you why. So let's decide right now with this particular boundary that you're setting with this particular person, if you want to share why you established it. And if not, maybe like write down how you're going to respond when they're like, why? Or what? Or you've never asked this of me before. Or like, who are you right now? People can get really upset, but their response is not your responsibility. So maybe you just say, it's just what I need right now. It's just what I need right now. Or I'd rather not share any further. Or it's a sensitive topic. It's a sensitive topic. I'd rather not share any further. And if they request more information about the reason for your boundary, and you are comfortable with sharing those details with them, what will you say? And maybe this is a boundary you need to set with multiple people, and some people you feel safe enough to share why, and some people you don't. So why? What would you say? If you can explain why this boundary is important to you in your relationship, what would you say? Like, this is going to make our visits more relaxed, which we'll all enjoy more. Or I'd feel more valued in our friendship and then look forward to our conversations. Or another example, like in the text message thing, not doing it on the weekends with your work. I'll feel appreciated knowing you respect my family time, which makes me more happier and productive when I show up on Monday. So, would you share the reasons for establishing your boundary? Yes or no? And if so, what would you say in those circumstances? Okay, that's it. You did it. You set a boundary and you've worked through all the scenarios and how that boundary might play out. So there's one more thing we need to do. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. We're going to make a personal agreement with ourselves. This is an agreement part where you reinforce that you are worthy of setting these boundaries, you're worthy of setting the limits, and you refuse to take on guilt or responsibility for how other people are going to receive your message. And you're giving yourself a great big high five for sticking up for yourself because you deserve it. So if you want to come along with me, you're welcome to get cozy in your chair, maybe put both of your feet on your floor, get really tall in your spine, roll your shoulders up and back, maybe even close your eyes if you're in a space where you can do that. Let's take a nice deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Just soft sigh. And you can, in your mind or out loud, if you're in a space where you can repeat after me, make this agreement with yourself. I am worthy of setting this limit for the benefit of my time, energy, mental health, and relationships. I am worthy of setting this limit for the benefit of my time, energy, mental health, and relationships. I acknowledge that they don't need to understand or agree with my boundary in order to respect it. I acknowledge that they do not need to understand or agree with my boundary in order to respect it. I recognize that their response to my clear and kind and simple boundary is not my business, nor is it my responsibility. Their response is not my responsibility. And I will continue to show up for myself by setting and holding the healthy boundaries I deserve, remembering that boundaries are a practice, and by showing myself grace. I will continue to show up for myself by setting and holding healthy boundaries. I deserve it. Boundaries are a practice, and I'm going to show myself grace. Keep your eyes closed if they're closed. Maybe take another deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. How does it feel? How do you feel now? You've just shown up, done some work. How does it feel in your body without judgments or labels or filtering your thoughts or even naming what you're feeling? In your skin, how does it feel right now? You're welcome to open your eyes if they're closed. I promise a surprise, and it's coming at the end. It's coming. But this is what you accomplished. I want to take a moment just to celebrate you. You established your top core values. You dug deep into your why. You found out why boundaries are self-care. You learned simple guidelines to boundaries. I gave you 8 simple guidelines, and if you showed up live, you have a little poster you can display with those guidelines. You discovered 3 types of boundaries and how flexible boundaries are usually the best. You explored the stoplight method for confidence. And you set your own personal boundary with me step by step. You did it. So what's next for you? What's next? If you're wondering what to do next with everything you just learned so you don't lose it, Or maybe you're curious on how to actually implement the healthy boundary concepts that I've just given you without fear and overwhelm and guilt and anxiety. If this workshop was really meaningful for you, but you still don't feel like you have the courage to implement these skills for lasting change, I want to remind you, you are always in choice. You may not get to pick your circumstances, but you do get to respond. You get to choose how you respond to them. You're always in choice. So you can choose to take these skills and try them on and see how it goes on your own, or I have something special I'd like to offer you to get you there. Would it be okay if I shared it with you now? Okay, great. Here's a testimonial. One last testimonial from someone who invested in herself and worked with me. Christy says at every turn, Nettie listened and essentially held up a mirror for me. She helped me find myself at a time I was feeling very lost, and I will forever be grateful. Through our time together, I uncovered some things I needed to process so I could communicate in a more true and meaningful way with my loved ones, leading to a deeper and more authentic connection. I began to naturally return to creative spaces and prioritize the things that were life-giving to me. Through this time, I found my voice after some real and suppressed trauma and began establishing negotiables and non-negotiables for myself. So Christy really needed to tap into her values and again live her life by design and not by default, soul first. And she was able to do that and gain confidence to communicate because she knew her values and decided what was okay and what was not okay, and can go for setting boundaries with that. And there was a lot of work in it. Like, she showed up so vulnerable, but ready to dig in so that she could come the truest, best version of herself. And I'm so, so happy for her. So here's my invitation for you. You now have the choice to do nothing, which most people do, but because you're here, I know you're not most people. You can take this knowledge out into the world and finally set that boundary. You wrote a boundary, you can finally set it, and please, please, please come back and let me know how it went. I love to be here and just cheer you on and root for you. And the other side of that choice is to do nothing. You can continue to feel like your relationships are one-sided, or you're drained after leaving someone's presence, or you get angry and irritable and continue to wonder why. Usually if you're angry, you need to set a boundary. Your environment quiets at night. This is me. I'd go to, like, everything around me gets quiet and my mind just goes off like fireworks, going to bed tired and wired. You get negative or anxious after spending time with someone, or little things set you out of proportion. You can continue to like avoid those people and daydream about how you're going to take a break from them. Continue getting sick on repeat because you never give yourself rest because you don't have boundaries with yourself, or you can't say no. And you can just agree to everything and ignore your own needs. You can do too much and live too fast. You can continue to get drawn into the drama and the conversations and the advice that you never wanted in the first place. Or you can choose one-on-one coaching with me. And it's free. It's a $250 value. And you're going to get an email about this because you're here with me live. But I wanted to offer you a free session if you can take advantage of it in the next 48 hours after you watch this replay or after you watch this video. So I'm super passionate about helping working women and busy mamas and working mamas because we go, 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 go. And we don't get to learn these skills in school, right? We have to figure it out on our own. And I want to reach out to you and offer this free session with follow-up support, one-on-one with me. And I promise you, the amount of clarity that is going to come out of this session is just going to blow your mind. Other people call these discovering calls, where they work and meet with people to see if they can collaborate, but this one-on-one session is going to be just me and you, where you get to bring the topic of conversation and I'll provide the framework for the session. And you can leave feeling confident and clear on a direction. And maybe we set a goal together. Maybe we talk about your relationships or your movement practice or your spirituality or your career or your self-image or your food on and off the plate, whatever it is, any arena of your life that you want to talk about. Maybe it's your boundary and you just need a little bit more clarity. I am so happy to hold space for you in a safe container, judgment-free, where you get to talk about your wants and needs and the next best steps for you. I hope that you sign up for this right now because you deserve it. You're worthy of it. You showed up today, you showed out today, you set your own boundary, you got clear on your values, and you know what's okay for you and you know what's not okay for you, and maybe you just need a little clarity on your next step, and I've got you. I'm so excited for this. It's my very, very favorite thing to do in the world, and I can't wait to offer it to you free of charge, no obligation, of course. So I'd love to take any questions. You can type them in the chat or come off mute. And I have a question for you, especially if you have people-pleasing tendencies. Would you rather keep the peace around you, or keep the peace within you? Would you rather keep the peace around you or the peace within you? Today, you took a huge step back and you prioritized what matters most to both your health and to your joy. And you've grown too much. You've come too far not to raise the bar on who has access to the goodness that's all of you, the layers of all of you. So take the boundary that you set today and communicate it and come back and let me know how it went. And the offer is open. The table is open for free one-on-ones. And if not, here is my information. I give lots of free content. You can visit me on my website, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or send me an email. I want to thank you so, so much for being here. I am honored by your presence, and I wish you many, 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 many blessings. I can't wait to hop on these private coaching calls with you.